All right, so now we're going to look at defining our own renderers for our layers. Note that, again, if you have like predefined symbology or you set up symbology in ArcGIS, Online, that should be honored, but you can always change it using the methods I'll show you here. So with the first example here, we're going to look at a unique types renderer, which is basically like using collars to represent categories as opposed to like a continuous variable. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and open up my live preview here so we can see what we have. Okay, so we have this data set for Indiana. This is election results, Republican, Democrat. Okay, so let's look at how we actually set this up. So again, we have to reference the API, the CSS, and the JavaScript. We define the style for our viewport, which will hold the map, which is effectively the entire viewport, or sorry, the div that holds the map, which is effectively the entire viewport. Again, call our modules, and then call the functions in the same order. And here I'm building this this basically constant variable which is going to apply symbology. So I'm creating a variable called rep and one for dem, so basically Republican and Democrat. And this again is basically a JavaScript object. So the type is simple fill, and there's a bunch of different type options. Here you're basically just getting like a simple fill collar with an outline. This defines the collar, so that's in a hex code, so that's that red collar there. It's going to be a solid fill as opposed to like a hash pattern or something. And then within this, within this object, we also have a second object, which is a property which specifies the outline. So this is the width of the outline, and this is the color, and this is like an RGB A, so red, green, blue, alpha. So it's 0, 0, 0, so it's black, but then we've made it 50% transparent. And then the one for the dim is basically the same, except that we're swapping out the collar, right? So now I've swapped out this blue collar for the as opposed to the red, but everything else is effectively the same. Okay, and then we have this renderer, and now this is how we actually apply it. So we create this variable, vote rend, and again, it's set up in this JavaScript object notation. So we specify type, unique value, so because we want to represent categories. Legend options, this is just giving the legend title if we print a legend, which I actually didn't here. We'll talk about that when we look at widgets. So that's actually not necessary in this case. And then the default symbol will just be Republican if it doesn't know which to use, like if it's null, but in this case it doesn't matter because they all have a value, and that it's the default will be other, but again there's no other really, so that's not going to be used. And then we're going to symbolize using the winner 08 field, so it's the presidential winner 2008, and then we specify the values. So if it's Democrat, we're going to use the dim symbology. We're going to label Democrat in the legend if there was a legend. And then for the Republican, it'll use the Republican symbology, and then we'll label Republican in the legend. Right? So there's kind of two steps. You define your symbology, and then you apply it to the value that it relates to. In this case, we're using unique value, so it's a color mapped to a specific value in an attribute field. All right, and then I create a map object, create a viewport, read in a data layer. Again, this is coming from my ArcGIS Online account, and then I assign the renderer to it, and then add it to the map. So it takes on the renderer that I'm that I defined, as opposed to like the default. Okay, so as a second example, let's look at a classified render for like a continuous variable. All right, and then we'll go ahead and launch our live preview for that. Okay, so now we're showing a different type of value. We're showing something continuous. This is specifically showing, let me see here, median income. So it's median income by county. This is data from the census. Okay, so first I generate some values. So again, we're using a simple fill. I pick a collar. types, it's solid, and then an outline. And effectively I just replicated that, and all I really did was change the base color by picking a different hex code. And I got these colors using Color Brewer, so it was a nice like green color palette. So I have one that's for less than 40, less than 50, less than 65, less than 75, less than 90. Okay, and then we construct the renderer. But now we're going to use class breaks as opposed to the unique values because, again, we're showing something continuous. This is the title that will show up in the legend. If we print a legend, which we didn't in this case, this sets the values for the default, which, again, really doesn't matter because our classes cover all the measurements. Okay, so this is a little different from the last one. So instead of specifying a unique category, we specify a range of values. So in this one, we have a min value of 0 to a max value of 39,999. So if it's in that range, it'll get assigned to that symbol, and that's the label that'll show in the legend. So all we're really doing here is changing the range of values and then using a different symbol each time. And then again, this is all basically just done in object notation, JavaScript object notation. And then we make our map object, we add it to a viewport, set the center and zoom, I read the data layer in, again this is coming from our ArcGIS Online account, and then I use the renderer to display it and add it to the map. So that's more for continuous values, where I pick my own data ranges.